In this Blender tutorial, I'll show you how to create this procedural snow generator. So this is a geometry nodes modifier setup which you can add to objects, which will add snow on top of the objects. Now this is also a product which I'm selling on my Gumroad store and Patreon page and the Blender Market, so if you'd like to purchase the geometry nodes snow generator, I'll have links in the video description to the product. So at the beginning of this video, I'll show you how to use the product for everyone who's purchased it, but then after I show you how to use the product, the rest of the video will be a tutorial showing you how to create it yourself. So for everyone who's purchased, you'll get this Blender file with these different example objects. And in the Blender file, there's going to be an asset library with these different snow and ice materials, as well as the geometry nodes modifier setup called snow generator. So you can just drag and drop it onto the objects, and it's going to add snow to the objects. So you can see it's just adding snow to the top of the object. Now if you have a different Blender file and you want to add the snow generator to your object, there's two ways you can add the snow generator to your object. You can click on File and then click on Append, and then you can locate to the folder where you have the product files, go into the snow generator Blender file, you can go to Node Tree, and then you can click on Snow Generator. Then if you just click on the object that you want to add the snow to, you can go to the modifiers, click on Add Modifier, and start to type in snow, and you can see there it is, Snow Generator. And you can see it's going to add snow to the object. The other way to add snow in your projects is to add it as an asset library. So you can click on Edit and you can go to the Preferences, and you can click over here on File Paths and go to the Asset Libraries and click on the plus icon. Then just locate to the folder where you have the product files and click on Add Asset Library, and you can just rename this whatever you want. I'm just going to call it Snow Generator, and you can save Blender's user preferences. Then if you just split any window in Blender and click here in the corner, you can change this to the Asset Browser, and then you'll just need to select the Snow Generator. So here's the snow generator files. So let me just delete the modifier. So now if you have any object, you can just click and drag and drop it from the asset browser onto your project. And then also it's going to come with these different snow and ice materials. And so you can change the snow and ice materials by just changing it right here on the modifier setup. Now, if the object is rotated and the scale and rotation are not applied, then the snow generator might look a bit weird. So I have this large monkey head and it's rotated over. And if I just drag and drop the snow generator here onto the object, you can see the snow is a lot larger than on the other objects. And also it's not actually going down on the top of the monkey head. That's because you need to hit Control A and you need to apply the rotation and scale. So when you apply the rotation and scale, now you can see the snow is a little bit smaller because the monkey head was large. And then also it's coming down from the top of the object. So if you add it to an object and it just doesn't look correct, make sure you apply the rotation and scale of the object before adding the snow generator. So then if you go over here to the modifier properties here on the geometry nodes, there's some different customizable settings you can use to control the snow. So there's the snow rotation. So if you turn them all to 0, there's no snow. And then if I turn this one up here, the bottom one, this one is the Z. So you can see as I turn this up more and more, you can see now there's going to be more snow. Or I could turn this to a -1, and now the snow is just going to come up from the faces which are on the z-axis, but from the bottom faces instead of the top. Or I could turn this one to 1. You can see now it's going to be on the back. Or of course the negative value of that is going to come from the front. And also this one here, of course, is going to be over on this side. Or if I turn this one to -1, it's over here on this side. So you can change the snow rotation. However, for most things, you're just going to want to turn the bottom value, which is the z-axis, to 1. Then there's also this snow amount. So I can turn this up and you can see that's going to add more snow to more of the faces. However, you may not want to do this because you can see like right here, it wouldn't really make sense that the snow would stay here. The snow would probably fall down, and that's because these faces are just slightly pointed up. So what you can do is turn the snow amount down, and this way it's only going to add the snow to the faces which are pointing like straight up. So now you can see by adding less snow, there's only going to be snow on the very top. So for maybe this scene, for this monkey head, just turning it to maybe something like that looks pretty good. So there isn't snow here on the side of the monkey, but there is on the top. Then there's also the snow thickness, and you should definitely be careful with this because if you turn it up too quickly, then it might get kind of laggy. So I'd recommend just clicking here with the arrows just to turn this up and down. So you can just make the snow less thick, and now you can see the snow is a lot more thin, and that actually does look quite a bit more realistic. But it's going to depend on whichever object you're adding it to and the size of the object. For example, like right here, I've added this onto my low poly wooden cabin, which I do have a tutorial on how to create this. But what I might want to do is just turn down the snow thickness. So I can turn this down, and then what I also might want to do is turn the snow amount down a little bit, so there's a bit less snow. So that's a lot better for the scene now. Now there's just little bits of snow there on the planks there of the cabin. Now there's also two smoothness values. So there's a snow smoothness and a smoothness value. So first there's the snow smoothness, which is basically just a factor value. So you can see the snow is more smooth at 1 or it's not very smooth at 0. And then there's also this smoothness value. So if I turn this up more and more, you can see the snow is just going to continue to get more and more smooth. But eventually if you make it too smooth, it does start to go into the mesh. So I have the smoothness value at a default value of 40. You could also turn it down to 0 if you don't want any smoothness, but now the snow looks quite a bit more chunky. Then there's also the snow material. So you can of course add whatever material you want if you just add a material into your project. However, the project files are also going to come with the different snow and ice materials. So for example, I could use like this ice material. Let's add this one. So you can see there's like an icy material. If I wanted to add ice, there's also like this snow with ice chunk. So that's pretty cool. So it's a lot of snow, but then little chunky bits of ice. There's also like this icy snow. That one's kind of similar, but looks a little bit different. There's also this snowy ground if you want to add that one. So a snowy ground. Let's jump over here to the cabin here. And for the cabin, I could add like some ice if you wanted to make it look like there's like a layer of ice. So I could use like the cracked ice one. So there's like a layer of cracked ice over the cabin. There's also just like the default ice one. So that's pretty cool. So maybe there was like, freezing rain and it froze over the cabin. And also snow and ice. This one is pretty cool as well. And the default one, which I have on the object, is bumpy snow. And the bumpy snow actually has a little bit of displacement. So it is actually going to kind of displace the mesh a little bit. So it'll look a little bit more realistic by just having it slightly bumpy. And then the final setting on the node group is the snow geometry density. And so this is going to make the snow more detailed or less detailed. So I would recommend just clicking right here just to turn up by very small amounts, because if you turn it up way too fast, it can get kind of laggy. So you can see if I turn this value up, the snow is going to have less geometry, but it also doesn't look as detailed. So you can see there's kind of some glitches. So I could turn this down instead. And if I turn it down, it's going to have a lot more detail, but just note that this is going to add a lot more geometry. So it is going to be a bit more laggy in the scene. But you can definitely see now here, like the edges are definitely a lot more detailed. Now, if you want to, you can also apply the modifier and have it be actual geometry. So if I just click on the drop down here and click on apply, just to apply that. Now, if I go into edit mode, you can see it's real geometry. You could, for example, hit the L key with your mouse hovered over the snow to select it, hit the P key to separate, and you could separate it by selection. And now you just have this piece of snow here. So if you want to like go and maybe do some sculpting or do like UV unwrapping or just work with the mesh in more detail, you could apply it and then you could actually have mesh with just the snow. And applying the modifier would also be really useful if the object is kind of dense and you want to kind of work with it and make it less dense. So you can of course change the snow geometry density down, but if it is kind of laggy in your scene, you could click here on the drop down and you can click on apply to apply the snow geometry nodes. And then what you could do is go here to the materials and you could just select the bumpy snow and go into edit mode and just make sure everything is deselected. Then you can click on the select button and that's just going to select all the snow. You can then hit the P key and then you can separate by selection. So now the snow is going to be all its own object. So you can see there is the snow. So then if you wanted to, you could like go into sculpt mode and sculpt the snow. What you could also do is add the decimate modifier to just the snow object and you could turn the ratio way down, maybe to like a 0.3, and then you could apply that modifier. So now if I go into edit mode, you can see the snow is a lot less dense because we applied that modifier. So that's how you use the geometry node snow generator. So if you're interested in purchasing the product, then I'll have the links in the description. But now the rest of this video will be a tutorial showing you how you can create it yourself. So I'm in a new scene in Blender and my screencast keys will be right down here in the corner so you can see what buttons I'm pressing. So what I'm going to do is select everything. We'll just delete everything and I'm going to add an object that I want to add the snow generator to. So for example, I am just going to add a monkey head. I'm going to hit Control 2 to add a subdivision surface modifier and then I will just click on the drop down and apply the modifier and shade the object smooth. So we have a nice smooth monkey head. You don't have to apply the modifier. You could just add the geometry nodes after the subdivision surface, but I'm just going to go with a smooth monkey head. Let's also really quick add a material to this. So I'll click on new and I'm just going to make this kind of like a dark blue material. So let's now jump over to geometry nodes to go to the geometry nodes editor. So we'll click on new to add new geometry nodes and I'm going to rename this to snow generator. And also here on the side panel, I'm going to call this snow generator here as well. So let's just minimize the side panel. So the first thing that I want to do is delete all the faces except the faces which are pointing directly up. And that way it'll look like the snow is snowing down on the object and the snow is only on the top faces or the faces which are pointing up. So what I'm going to do is search for the delete geometry node. Let's stick this right here. And you can see the entire monkey is gone because we deleted the geometry. So what we need to do is just add something into the selection so it only deletes what's in the selection. So what I'm going to do is search for a normal node. We'll just add the normal here, and this will give us the normal data, which is the direction of the faces. But what I want to do is just isolate the faces which are pointing up. So I'm going to search for a vector math node. So just add vector math, drop this right here. And on the add type, we want to change this to dot product instead. And then the normal can go into the top one, and then the value can go into the selection. So now we can see the entire monkey head. But if I now turn up like this value here, you can see this side of it goes away. If I turn up this value, the back of it goes away. If I turn up the last one here, you can see the ones pointing on the z-axis go away. So I'm going to turn the bottom value, the z-axis, I'm going to turn this to a value of 1. Now what I also want to do is control the amount of faces that I'm selecting. So I'm going to search for a math node, and we're going to put it here after this dot product. And we're going to leave it set to add. We're going to turn the default value to 0. But now I can drag this value around, and you can see if I turn the value up higher and higher, it's only going to select the faces which are pointing like directly down. Or if I keep it at 0, it's just going to select all the faces which are pointing just slightly down. So we're going to use this as a custom value to control the snow. Now what I also want to do is invert this. So to invert it, we can search for a Boolean math. So add the Boolean math, and we're going to drop it here after the add. And on the and type, we're going to change this to a not instead. And now you can see that we're getting the top faces instead of the bottom faces. So this is where the snow is going to show up on the top of the object. Now what I also want to do is control the contrast a bit, because you can see it's like selecting these faces which are kind of pointed mostly sideways. So what I'm going to do is search for a color ramp. And we'll put this here right after the add, but before the not. What I can now do is take the black value and drag it out here, and that's going to add a bit more contrast. So I'll just drag the black value to about there, and that looks a lot better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these nodes right here, and I'm going to keep things nicely organized. So with all these nodes selected, I'll hit Control J, and that's going to join them together into a frame just to keep things nicely organized. And then with the frame selected, I'll press F2 to add a label, and I'm going to call this top faces. So this is the nodes that we're using just to create the top faces. So now we actually need to turn these top faces somehow into like lumpy snow and then mix it back with the original monkey. So to do this, we're going to search for the distribute points on faces. So add distribute points on faces, stick it there after the delete geometry. And if I turn up this density, you can see it's actually starting to show us kind of the shape of the monkey if we turn the density up really high. So I'm going to go with a density of 1,500. So it's nice and dense. So now what I want to do is actually turn this into like a thick mesh. So to do this, we want to search for points to volume. So add the points to volume, and we want to drop it right here after distribute on points. So now it almost looks like a foggy monkey head made out of clouds. But what I want to do is take the amount here, and I want to change it to size instead. And then I want to take this voxel size, and I'm going to turn it to a 0.02, so it's quite a bit smaller. And so you can see the voxel size is smaller, so everything's really detailed now. And then here on the radius, I'll turn this just to a 0.1, so it's a lot smaller. So now you can see where the snow is, it almost looks like a foggy cloud effect. So I just want to turn that there into a mesh. So what we're going to do is search for volume to mesh. So add a volume to mesh after the points to volume, and now you can see we're actually turning that into a mesh. And you can also adjust the threshold here if you want, but I'm just going to leave it how it is. Now if I zoom in closely, you can see that it looks all sharp, and if I try to shade it smooth, it's not actually shading it smooth. That's because we need to search for the set shade smooth node and just stick it there after the volume to mesh. So let's just box select these 4 nodes, hit Control J to add them into a frame so we can remember what they do, and let's hit F2 to add a label, and I'm going to call this top faces to snow mesh. Top faces to snow mesh so we can remember what it's doing. Now you can see that it's like really lumpy, and that really doesn't look good. And you can also see there's kind of like these rings here. And so what I want to do is smooth that out. So let's drag the group output back here, and I want to search for the set position node. And we're going to use this to smooth everything out. So we'll drop the set position right here. And then what I want to do is search for the blur attribute, drop this down here. And then finally, we're going to search for the position node, drop this here. Now we want to put the position into the blur attribute. So we need to turn the float to vector. So now it's going to be a vector input and output. So we'll put the position into the value, and then the blur attribute, this can go into the position. So we're going to kind of blur and smooth that out. Now I can turn up the iterations here, and that's going to smooth it out more and more, and that's definitely looking a lot more like snow. So I'm going to turn the iterations to 40, and then we can also use this value here to control the strength of it, so we'll use that later in the custom node group. Now this mesh is definitely going to get pretty dense. If I click here in the corner and drag down to split the window, I can click here in the corner and I can change the editor type to the spreadsheet. And if I just make sure I have the object selected, you can see it's going to give us a bunch of different data here, and don't worry about all this data. We're not going to use most of this. You can see right here on mesh, this is the mesh we have, and you can see there are vertices, edges, and faces, and it's going to show us the poly count. So this object has 41.3 thousand vertices, and that is really high, and this is a pretty simple object, and when we add this to a much larger object, it can get quite laggy. So to avoid this lag, what I'm going to do is search for the merge by distance. So add the merge by distance, and we're going to put it right here after the set position. So now what I can do is change this and take a look at the vertex count as we do this. So I'm going to turn the distance to a larger value. So if it's a larger value, it's going to merge vertices which are closer together. So I'm going to turn this to a 0.02. And now you can see the vertices here are only 12,000 instead of like 41,000. That's going to get rid of way more of the mesh, so it's going to get rid of extra topology. But if you turn this up too high, it might start to look kind of chunky. So I'm going to go with a distance of just 0.02. So now I can just click here and drag over and then let go just to close that panel there. So now I want to add back the original monkey. So to do this, I can search for the join geometry and drop it right here. Let's drag this over, and then let's take the original geometry, which is from this group input, and we're going to drag this all the way over and stick it into the join geometry. So now we have the original monkey head, and I can go into the material preview to see this. Now let's also just kind of bring these together, kind of just stick them together to organize them better and kind of compress them a little bit. And I'll hit Control J and F2, and I'm just going to call this smooth snow, because these are the nodes which are smoothing the snow, so we can just remember what everything does. So now I also want to be able to set a material onto the snow. So to do this, we're going to add the set material node. Now let's drag this over, and we're going to put the set material after the smooth snow, so stick it right there. And then on the drop down, you can add a snow material. So what I'm going to do is click over here on this assets tab, which I've created, and here's my Ultimate Blender procedural material pack. And so what I'm going to do is go to my snow and ice. And if you're interested in purchasing my Ultimate material pack, I'll have the product links in the description. So what I'm going to do is just add a new object. Let's just add like a plane. I'll bring it over, and I'm just going to take my bumpy snow and drag and drop it onto the plane, and then I can just delete the plane. So now the smooth snow or the bumpy snow is in the Blender file. So if I go back to geometry nodes, let's click on the object, I can click here on the drop down and just add the bumpy snow. So now you can see we have that nice snow shader there, and it also is using a little bit of displacement, so the mesh is slightly bumpy there on the edges. And also, if you are interested in watching my snow tutorials, I'll have links in the video description to my snow tutorials, or you can also just purchase these snow materials on my Gumroad and Patreon. So all the links are in the description to those products. Now I do think the snow is a little bit too thick. So what I'm going to do here is go to the points to volume node, and here on the radius, I can just turn this down a bit to like a 0.05, so it's only half the size. And now you can see that looks a lot better. It looks more like snow. You can use this to change like the thickness of the snow, but I like that a bit better at 0.05. I'm just going to jump over here to the layout now, and I'll go into the rendered view, and real quick I'm just going to set up a little bit of like lighting and things, and I'm going to be using the Cycles rendering engine, but this totally works in Eevee as well if you want to use Eevee. So I'm going to go here to the world properties. I'm going to click on the yellow dot here next to color and choose environment texture, and then open a texture. And I'm going to be adding this acoustical shell HDRI from polyhaven.com. Link will be in the video description, and I download the 1K HDR version, so I'll open this image. Then what I'm going to do on the render properties is I'm going to turn the color management to filmic and the look to a very high contrast, and also on the film tab I'll just turn on the transparent button. And then finally I'm just going to add a light. I'll add a sunlight. I'll rotate the sunlight over, and on the light settings I'll maybe turn up the strength to 3 so it's a little bit brighter. Let's go back over here to the geometry nodes, and I now want to add up all the custom values, so it's really easy to control on the side panel. So right here in the group input, we can plug values up to this group input to control them on the side panel on the modifier properties. So I want to add the snow rotation, so what I can do is take this vector and plug it here into the extra socket, and if I hit the N key to open up the side panel, let's click here on vector. I'll double click on this to rename it, and I'll just rename it to snow rotation. And then also if I open up the side panel right here, you can see there it is, so there's the snow rotation. rotation. And then what I like to do is click on the single value, and that way it gets rid of this input attribute toggle. So I'll just turn on single value. I also want to control the amount of snow, which is controlled by this add here. So let's plug the value into the extra socket, and let's double click on this, and I'll just rename this to snow amount. And then also I'll click on the single value. Then I want to control the snow thickness. So I'm going to drag the group input right up here above the points to volume. And we have this radius here. Now definitely be careful with turning this up and down, because if you turn it up too high too quickly, it can definitely lag your Blender file. So I'm going to turn it to a 0.05 on default, and I'll put the radius here into the extra socket. Let's click and drag this to make it bigger. And I'm going to rename this to snow thickness. Then I want to control the snow smoothness. So I'm going to drag this right down here. Let's hit Alt P to bring it out of the frame, and I'll drag it here underneath the smooth snow. And we can change this weight, so I can drag the weight up and down to control the smoothness. So I'll put the weight there into the extra socket, and I'll just rename this to snow smoothness. Then I also want to add the iterations. So I'm going to put this into the extra socket here, and this I'm going to call smoothness value. Then I want to control the material. So let's go here to the material. Let's drag this here and drop it here into the bottom socket there. And let's just rename this to snow material. And then I want to control the density. So you can see there's the merge by distance. So we'll put this distance value into the extra socket. And this one, if I just drag this down here, this one I'm going to rename to snow geometry density. Also right here on the snow geometry density, I want to choose single value. So it's going to hide the input attribute toggle. And let's do the same thing for the snow smoothness. So choose single value, and also the snow thickness. So click on snow thickness and choose single value, just so it gets rid of the input attribute toggle. So it makes the geometry node setup look a bit more neat. So let's just hit the N key to close the side panel, and I'll drag the node group right back over here, and I'll go back here to the layout and just save the project again. So if you go over here to the modifiers, here is the custom settings. So you can change like the rotation. You can have it going on the side of the monkey head or the top or the front. You can also change the snow amount. So you can have more snow or less snow. Then you can also change the snow thickness. You can have it bigger or smaller. Then we have the snow smoothness, and then we also have this smoothness value. So you can turn this up if you want to be very smooth, but it does start to disappear if it's too smooth. Then you have the snow material, so you can add whatever material you have. And then we also have the snow geometry density. So definitely be careful with this, because you don't want to turn up too high or too low, because you can see if it's too low, it starts to look a bit low quality. But if you turn it up too high and there's too much geometry, it can start to make the scene pretty laggy. So now what I've done is I've just added in my low poly wooden cabin. I do have a tutorial on this if you're interested, and you can also purchase this asset with the links in the description, and it's also in the product files. And then what I can do is just click on add modifier, and I can just search for a snow generator and just add the snow generator. So that's it for the tutorial. So that is how you create this snow generator created with geometry nodes. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. And if you'd like to help support me and this YouTube channel and purchase the snow generator, you can purchase it with the links in the description on my Gumroad store and Patreon page and the Super Hive Market. You can also learn how to create procedural snow by watching my snow tutorials. Links are in the description. And the snow generator product also comes with these different snow materials which you can add to your objects. So I hope you found the video helpful, and thank you for watching.